Hey everybody, time for another Red Chair Chat. And we have a sponsor today. He doesn't know it yet, but my wonderful friend at Big Papa Corn. He's a local Portland business guy. Read my book, and so you need to get online and order some Big Papa Corn. This is caramel chocolate dazzle. So just kind of recap just a little bit. Reference to the book that I wrote and doing research for the book to find out a little bit about my birth father, who I knew nothing about. Anyway, so I went through the process and found out as much information as I felt that I wanted to find out at the time, and was enough for me to get started on the book. So a lot of you, if you haven't seen that information or that Red Chair Chat, you can tune into that and it'll bring you kind of up to date. Well, this is a special time and episode because as I did some research, I actually found and communicated with one of my sisters, my father's daughter by one of his other marriages, and spoke with her briefly. Her name is Diane, and I kind of left it at that. I knew there were some other potential siblings out there, but I don't know. I just kind of let it lie and did nothing about it until I got an email from Eileen Tilson, who is basically my adopted daughter. She worked for me for quite a while. And she sent me this email. She goes, "Lanny, this is the strangest thing. I'm forwarding you an email from somebody that says they might be your brother." And so I read the email, and it was signed Donny Downard. And so, being curious as I am, I reached back out, and I think I shocked him because he didn't think that I was going to reach out that quickly. But anyway, since that time, we have been together several times. I went to visit him and his family down in Texas when we were there in Austin for the CMT Music Awards. And anyway, he has joined us in Nashville and is out at the farm, and so I'm going to invite to our Red Chair Chat my brother, Donny Downard, or he likes to be called Donny because there's another Donny Downard.
There is indeed.
What's up?
How's it going?
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
I thought what we would do is kind of do this in chunks. Talk about how you found me, because I had changed my name from my birth name of Boyd Anthony Downard to Lanny West. So how in the world would you find me? So there's a lot to cover, and you guys, this is exciting and very interesting. So let's talk about how you found me, because this is the providence of God. There's just no question about it. That do we look anything alike?
It is. It's, you can say it's a small world. The odds of the things happening that came together. People talk about it, things happening by chance. There's absolutely no way that such a random grouping of things happening by chance could possibly lead to what happened. And so obviously we had known for several years since Dad passed away that there were other siblings out there from other wives.
To kind of put this in context, our sister is Dory, and then a half-sister.
Yes, Kathy.
And Ellie, your mom, who I got to meet, what a charming, charming lady, is the 8th wife of our father.
Yes.
You guys knew nothing about any of the other marriages or children or potential children out there until he passed away and you read the will.
And which was the big surprise. I know that my mom, that Ellie found out about the other wives shortly before my dad passed. Our dad,
yep.
And kept that pretty well secret. I think that Dory had done a little bit of genealogy for a high school report and had learned a little bit more, but I was completely in the dark. I had already moved away. So when we got the copy of Dad's will, and the very first page was basically, if you've read the book of Genesis and you get to the generations, any of the generations. It doesn't matter whether it's the generations of Adam or the generations of Noah, of any of them. And you get to the begets that are so hard to get through. That was pretty much the first page of the will. So-and-so begat so-and-so, except Dad was doing all the begetting with different women. It was a surprise to me specifically and to everybody that there were a significant number of other children and other wives out there that we really didn't know a whole lot about. And of course, back then, that was 26 years ago, there was no 23andMe, Ancestry.com, even Google for that matter.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a simple fix of, hey, we can find these other people. So it was a surprise to find out that I wasn't the first child. I was the first child of Don and Ellie's marriage. And then he adopted my older brother and sister from my mom. But then that I was technically the 8th child of 9 overall out of 8 marriages.
Right.
So it was quite the surprise. But flash forward, and I did have the opportunity to meet Donald.
In the research that I did I can't remember which marriage that it was, but a Charlotte, from Charlotte, I think, North Carolina,
Yes,
where they were from
North Carolina, yes.
that there was Donald Downard Jr. And I read about some newspaper clippings because the society pages back then they talked about they're traveling to Europe, to Italy, and Lieutenant Colonel Donald Downard will meet them there, and traveling with is Donald Downard Jr. And I think he was 3 years old back at that time.
At the time, exactly.
So here comes another Donald Downard, you.
Which I think surprised him when he found out. He actually reached out to us, and it wasn't uncommon early on after Dad had passed. He kept in contact with a lot of his soldiers. And so it wasn't uncommon that they would accidentally get my phone number, and they'd be looking for Lieutenant Colonel Downard. And I'd have to say, well, this is his son. And so we got the call, and we got the call from Donald and Don. And when I entered, this is Donald Downard, and I said, I'm his son. I think it took him back just a little bit at first.
Did he hang up?
He did hang up. We called back and we talked, and it actually been an amazing relationship. And so I knew that he existed, but that was about the extent of what I knew.
So how long ago was that?
That was 19 years ago now.
Okay.
Caleb was 2. My youngest was 2 years old.
Right.
So flash forward to just the random events that occurred. I am speaking to one of my coworkers who, I'm in San Antonio, she's in Connecticut, and she's talking about retiring and moving to North Carolina. And she's going to get a chance to meet a half sister that she's not known.
Wow.
So we start talking about half siblings that we don't know about. And she randomly Googles Dad.
Right.
And in that random Google, she pulls up an article by a gentleman named Chris Bray. And the very first statement in that article is a reference to your book.
Crazy.
Is a reference to your book.
And it had a quote. It had a quote that I had said in that book.
It did.
He writes some pretty amazing blogs.
He does.
Interesting blogs, and it's put out through, what is it called?
Substack. So
anyway, it was an article about court-martial, military court-martial, how they're unfair in some aspects, and that sometimes bad people get court-martialed, but then they don't get court-martialed. It all depends on their value to the military and so forth. And at the very top, there's a picture of our father, and the article is about him and his court-martial, which got rescinded. But then the first paragraph is a quote from my book, right?
Exactly. So it starts out, it says, according to a son that never knew him, in his memoirs, and the memoirs are the link to the book, and then it has a quote specifically, right? And so I have, of course, acknowledged that, yes, this is Dad, and that there was some baggage, and we've been learning a little bit more, as far as like the court-martial was concerned and things like that. We learned a little bit more about that. So, and that, yes, this is apparently a brother. So I click on the link. I pull up the book, and you confused me at first because it
I
said, only because it said Lanny West. And I'm thinking, that is not a name I would recognize. And so immediately, within moments, I ordered the book on Amazon and got it the next day. And as soon as I opened it up and I saw the dedication, I was dead certain. This is obviously a brother that I did not know about. That's when I reached out and said, hey, you know what? Maybe if you want to talk, this is an opportunity.
And
to
you
talk.
reached out to Eileen because she's listed as my PR person.
Exactly. I looked you up, Googled you, found your PR, went to your PR and said, hey, just want you to know I'm out here if he wants to talk. And I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what kind of response I would get, simply because
Well,
you didn't know Dad.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that through this 23andMe and they did their DNA. I didn't do the DNA thing. Just to be honest, there may be some children out there I don't know about. But anyway, I'd love to know you if you're out there. They're very apprehensive. They want to know who that birth parent is, or somebody that gave them up for adoption, or whatever the situation is. And there's a lot of angst in going through with that. But I never knew him. I only knew a little smattering about this military background of his, which we're going to get into later in this conversation because it's pretty dadgum amazing. So I didn't know him, so I had no reason to not, reach out. So I did.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know. That's the amazing thing about this story, is that there are just new chapters being written every time we turn around. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But being able to reach out to you and talk to you gave you the opportunity to introduce me to Diane.
Right.
And her family.
And now you're in communication with my brother, David.
Exactly.
Who I don't think I've ever spoken about. David was in the military as well. But David and I are the sons of our father.
So,
and David was actually born in, what did I say, Sendai, Japan?
In Japan.
Because he went over to and we're going to get into all that because this is the most outstanding thing you've ever heard. So this is how we connected.
Exactly. And through that, you were able to meet Don.
Right.
And Dory. And so, and again, all from a random conversation with a coworker.
And what's crazy is God kept getting us closer and closer together, right? So I spent 2 years in Houston working for a bar restaurant company, and I think Leslie and I went 22 years to Austin, Texas, to South by Southwest, and you were in Boerne, Texas, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away from Austin. And then in my days of managing artists, my artist played at the Evening Muse in Charlotte many times. So I was in Charlotte, and here Donald lives, and he grew up in, I kept getting put closer and closer together without even knowing about that. So that's how we connected. And when Leslie and I went to Austin, Texas, not too long ago for the CMT Music Awards, I rented a car and drove down to Boerne, Texas to see. Well, let me go back, because you came to Nashville because the company you work for was planning a convention here, which you just got out of this past week. And you and I and Leslie went to dinner, and it was a 4-hour dinner.
It was.
It was fascinating. So that's how Donny and I connected in a very strange way. So kind of do a little bit of a pause, and we're going to move to the next stage of this. There'll be another episode of this, the Red Chair Chats, and thanks for joining.